Hello, everyone. It's Edward Zula, psychic medium. Welcome to another installment on my YouTube. This is a very special and unexpected installment, but something occurred to me earlier this afternoon, and of course, now we have this great kind of stormy weather, and I remembered that it was August 1st. And it was 58 years ago today that I actually had my first encounter with spirit that I was aware of. It was on August 1st, 1962, and I was a young tyke. I was 8 years old, and I had traveled by bus from New York City with my Aunt Irene down to Williamston, North Carolina, to spend a couple of weeks with my grandmother's sister, Annie, who had this, well, it was like an enchanted house to me, but it was actually built around 1870, 1875. It was an old farmhouse on a tobacco farm. She also grew soybeans and corn and a few other things. But the house was so magical to me because in the heat and in the sun and, watching everybody in their jeans out there, working the tobacco, and it was kind of all exciting and all new experiences. And I didn't live in a house with creaky floorboards and little narrow doorways that were I couldn't even imagine how my relatives passed through them. I know the house had been in the family for a couple of generations, and so Aunt Irene and I had decided to take the bus down to visit Annie. And Annie had recently lost her husband. I think it was in July she had lost her husband. But Annie was a very jovial spirit. It seemed to be a trait in the family of being very upbeat and jovial and engaging, and at least the women. I don't know. Yeah, definitely all the women are like that. So we get to this house and this wraparound porch with a porch swing and all kinds of smells and sounds that we associate with. For those of you who haven't seen movies who haven't been to the Southeast, it kind of reminded me of, To Kill a Mockingbird and a couple of those other movies that were about, that took place in the Deep South. Anyway, so this was a really wonderful old home with lots of creaky doors and squeaking floorboards and no air conditioning, and it was hot. It was hot and humid. So Annie helped us get up the staircase. Now I remember the staircase wasn't very even. It was really, really narrow and kind of wobbly. But I remember as we passed through the foyer of her house, and I turned and I looked in the dining room, she had I think it was a table in the dining room, which is not surprising, but it had black fabric pinned around it and draped around it. And there was another piece of cloth over the table that wasn't exactly a tablecloth, but it was something. And so it was sitting there empty. There wasn't anything on it. And the chairs were kind of all around the edges of the room, the dining chairs, which didn't strike me as an 8-year-old as particularly unusual. At any rate, So she shows us up to the rooms that we're going to be sleeping in. Now, Annie had 10 children, and those 10 children were raised in this house. And only one of them still was young enough to live with her, and the rest had gone on about their business. And some of them came back to the farm to work in the tobacco, or she also had string beans. I remember the fresh string beans were so wonderful. So we get up to the rooms, and my aunt and I are in adjacent rooms, and we had a little ritual at night of saying goodnight to each other by kind of tapping on the wall back and forth to each other. And so the first night we're there, I noticed that in my room there was a pair of slippers that I could see sticking out from underneath the bed. And they were way too big for me. They were an adult slippers, but they were just the heels were sticking out from under the bed. And I went to bed that night. It was really impossibly hot and humid. I believe I slept on top of all of the sheets and blankets, or I kicked them all off, or whatever the case may be. And I went to get up in the morning, and these slippers were set for me, like in position for me to just kind of step into them, to use them to go out. And I put my foot in one of them, and it was like way too big. And I thought my aunt was being very nice, the host, and she was being very nice. And Annie probably put them out there for me to use, but I just put them back underneath the bed. And so got up, did the day, had fun, hid in the potato barn, hung out with my cousin, ran around a little bit, took a ride on a cart, did all kinds of fun things, watched Alfred Hitchcock with the family, and it was the oppressive heat. I just remember how hot it was going into, she didn't even have a bathroom, she had an outhouse. And going to the outhouse was like a really novel thing for me then. And so I went, but I decided that I wasn't going to go at night because it was a little too creepy. It was just a little scary for me. I mean, once it got dark, the house just sort of didn't have the same kind of charm that it had during the day. It just seemed to have a feeling about it. And, but the adults were all laughing and engaging. And one particular night, her kids all came in, and we had a great big dinner. And by that time, the dining room table had been back, and the chairs were back around the table, and everything was sort of looking very normal. And went up to bed. And I guess I was one of the first to go to bed because I was only 8, and the others were staying up and carrying on and banging on the piano in her living room, and I fell asleep. I knocked on the wall when I heard my aunt come up. I knocked on the wall, and she knocked back, and I got up in the morning, and the slippers were turned again for me to step into them. And I just looked down and I thought, how weird is this? Why? Anyway, so I went up the hall and knocked on my aunt's door, the one who I had traveled with, and I said to her, do you think Aunt Annie wants me to use these slippers? They were kind of cloth men's slippers. And she said, what are you talking about? So she came in the room with me, and I showed her the slippers that were on the floor, and she said, I don't think so. I think they're way too big for your feet. And I said, yeah, me too. I think the same thing. So I put them back under the bed. I never thought to ask Annie during the day. I don't know why, but I never thought to ask her about that. And so my aunt says to me, I'm really sorry. Oh, I'm skipping ahead of myself. Sorry. Anyway, the gang was there. They were hanging out. I went to bed. But I rapped on the wall when I heard my aunt come up the stairs, and she rapped back on the wall. And later that evening, it must have been really late because I had been asleep for a while, and I heard someone was playing the piano, singing "Oh My Darling Clementine," and it sounded just like my cousin Pete. And I thought, he must be, I'm thinking to myself, he's drunk, he's, hanging out. I mean, they were like 18, 19, 20. And, but it was late. I remember thinking it was late for someone to be playing the piano and singing. And I just kind of went back to sleep. And in the morning, of course, the slippers were out again. And it was like, okay, I'm going to put these slippers in the closet, which is what I did. I decided to put them, no, I didn't put them in a closet. I'm sorry, I put them in a dresser drawer because I just, Anyway, so I put the slippers in a dresser drawer. And I go downstairs and we're going to have breakfast. And now it's just my aunt, the host, Aunt Annie, was there, and my Aunt Irene, who had carried me to North Carolina, and me. So it was just the 1, 2, 3 of us having, and Jackie, my cousin Jackie, who still lived with her. And so we're sitting around the breakfast table in the kitchen, and I said, I mentioned the slippers. I said, Annie, the slippers are too big for me, so I just put them away. And she kind of looked at me and said, okay, that's fine. Don't worry about it. She was good with it. She passed the biscuits, passed the bacon. We're sitting there having a conversation. And my aunt leaned over and she said to me, I didn't want to wake you up last night, so I didn't knock when I went upstairs. I said, what are you talking about? I heard you come up, and I knocked, and you knocked back. And she said, no, I don't remember. Maybe I did. I don't think I did. Now, she's trying not to scare the bejesus out of an 8-year-old kid. That's what she was trying to do. So, again, I just kind of let it pass. But again, the daytimes were really, really hot and oppressive, and we drank a lot of sweet tea, and we snapped a lot of beans on the porch, and we did a lot of telling family stories and laughing and joking. And then when night came, on this particular night, I happened to mention at dinner that I had heard Pete playing Clementine on the piano. And my Aunt Annie just went absolutely still. And she said, it sounded like my grandmother said, you heard what? And I said, I heard Pete playing and singing the piano last night when I was in bed. And she said, sweetheart, Pete left right when you went to bed. He and his brother took off. They went uptown, blah, 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 and on and on and on. I was like, well, who was playing the piano late, like at night last night? And my Aunt Irene looked at my Aunt Annie, and they exchanged one of those looks when I could feel the hair on the back of my neck standing up. And I said, okay, something is going on here. What is it? So Jackie was my cousin, and she's 10. She's 2 years older than me, and a smarty pants. She's the one who says, oh, Daddy used to play that song all the time and sing on the piano. That was his favorite song. And she would start singing, "Oh, my darling Clementine," at the top of her lungs. And my Aunt Annie lost it. She just said, "You cut that out right now. You hear me? Cut that." I'm like looking at my Aunt Irene, like for clues, like, do we get on a bus? Do we go home? What do we do? This is freaking me out. I don't know what's happening. And my aunt said, "We have one more day. That's it. It's okay. Don't worry about it." And so that night, I was in bed, and we had done our little ritual of knocking back and forth to each other. And the slippers stayed in the drawer. They were not out anywhere, you know. I noticed that all of my dirty clothes that I had laying around on the floor were in a nice little pile off to the side. And so I was a little nervous that night because of the piano thing, and I was like, I was done. I mean, this was not something that was familiar to me. I'd had precognition, I'd had visions, I knew things that were going to happen at a much younger age, but this was brand new. This was something that was new. And so there's this like horrendous scratching on the wall that is outside my window, next to the bedroom window, scratching and slamming and banging and slamming, and I'm thinking, what the hell is this? And I went into my aunt and I said, "I'm scared. I'm really scared." And she said, "Just hop in the bed." So I hopped in the bed with her, went to sleep, and she heard it too. She heard the noise too, and she said, "It's a tree hitting the house. And it's windy outside, and the tree is hitting the house. That's all you're hearing." And I said, okay, fine. So she comes in my room in the morning, and she sees all of my dirty clothes piled in the corner, and she says, "Well, I was wondering when you were going to pick that up." I said, "What do you mean? You know, like what?" And she said, "Well, your clothes were all over the room. I see you have them like piled neatly in the corner over there. You just put them in a bag, and we'll throw our laundry in the, all in one suitcase, and clean clothes in another." And I'm like scratching my head thinking, I thought she was the one who had put the clothes in the corner. So fast forward, we say our goodbyes. I say goodbye to this big old creaky house, say goodbye to the cousins that stopped by to bid us farewell. And we're on the bus going back to New York. And my aunt says, "You remember when we arrived and there was a table in the dining room?" And I said, "Yeah, I remember. It had fabric on it." And she said, "Yeah, well, Annie had not moved that table or taken that down or fixed the dining room up. She'd been very sad since her husband passed away." Right over my head. I was like, "What? I don't know what you're talking about." And she says, "Well, they had her husband, Jack, laid out in the dining room. That's where he was laid out on." I said, "You mean his dead body was in the house? Laid out in the dining room on the table?" She said, "Yeah." She said, right over right underneath our bedrooms where we were sleeping. I was like, okay. So she's telling me this. Thankfully, we're in the bus now. I think we're hitting Delaware. So I'm getting far enough away that I'm like being okay with this and just being very curious. So then she says, "I have two other things to tell you. One, the room that you slept in was his room. And as he got older, and Annie and Jack didn't sleep in the same room, and he slept in the room that you slept in. And I think the slippers, those were his slippers. She told me she had pushed them under the bed, but she didn't have the heart to get rid of them or do anything with them yet. And now my head is reeling. It is reeling. My head is spinning. I'm thinking, oh my God, there are such things as ghosts, oh my God. So, and then she proceeds to tell me that the night that I said I heard her knock on the wall, the night after the dinner with everybody, she said she definitely did not knock on the wall that night. She knows it. She didn't want to wake me up. And she also didn't want to scare me and tell me that she didn't knock on the wall. And then she topped it off by telling me, and then before we left today, I walked around the side of the house to see if there were any trees touching the outside wall where your bedroom was. She said there were no trees. So it wasn't wind blowing trees that was making that banging, scratching sound. And we kind of looked at each other, and at the same time we said, Uncle Jack. And it was amazing for me. I remember being so excited and scared that I had to make a beeline for the restroom on the back of the bus. But anyway, that's my special August 1st, 58th anniversary post. And if you got through this whole thing, because it's now going on 22 minutes, bless your heart. And thank you so much for your support and your love. And I thought I would share that kind of fun story on this little bit of a stormy night with you. And much love. Take care of yourself. Subscribe. Please share the video if you think it'd be interesting to somebody. Wash your hands. Social distance, wear your mask until we're told we don't have to anymore, and take care of yourselves. And I'll see you at my next installation, which I believe I am going to do about pets in spirit. Okay. Thank you. Have a great night.